General Lucky Irabor, joining us from Abuja Studio. General, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
It's good to see you.
I'm glad to be here.
The last time I sat and listened to your presentation on the issues around state of emergency, quite an impressive paper with a lot of applause. And I think we can glean from it to see how we will help the issue of national security. But I want to start on something not too heavy so that it can help you segue for us in the conversation. And one of the lines of that presentation is, he said, resonates deeply, lived realities of someone like me who has borne the weight of national security on the front. Your responsibilities, your duties, your obligation to the state. Talk to us about what it is to be somebody at that level who bears the responsibility of national security, because when it fails, all of us are coming gun blazing on you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Jeff and Nee, for having me. I'd like to say I'm delighted to be here. I also want to thank Nigerians for, especially those who are listening. You're very right. Leadership has never been easy. Leadership is, I've always maintained that leadership has pains. And so, right in the front lines, as commander of Operation Lafia Dole, and much later as Chief of Defense Staff, there are, of course, issues that come to you because the expectation is that you should deliver on the mandate that you have been assigned to. But, of course, whether you have the tools, whether, of course, you have the requisite cooperation of the populace, among several other factors, is a different thing entirely. And so what I meant during that presentation is that, look, there are things that do happen, behind the scenes, behind which, of course, is not made known to the public. And even now, as I speak, it might certainly not be what I will have to present to the public. But and that's also part of the reason why each time you invite me, or any of the media houses, they invite me, I took it upon myself as a responsibility to come to true light, because sometimes we fail to appreciate those who are bearing the brunt, who are holding those offices. Yes, we expect accountability from them, we expect results from them, but we must also know that these are men and women who are so patriotic, delivering what is expected by all means, that for them to be able to meet the yearnings and expectations of the people. So this is why I'm also here today, to add voice and to ensure that not only do we have a better outcome, but that Nigeria, live much better, and every day of our life we'll see an increasing ambience for us to fulfill our life as a people.
General, so let's go to some issues. Lakrawa, Ansaru, ISWAP, Boko Haram all have their base or some level of presence in our country, and that's a lot for one nation to bear. It would be unnecessary to go back to how we allowed all of this to happen, because now it is present evil with us. We're trying to combat all of this. From your expertise and from what you know, because part of what was talked about in that forum was about whether or not we need a proper state of emergency or not. Yes, we've seen records of some movements. DSS has done arrests. Troops have neutralized, people have been rescued. We've seen all of these things, but we're still dealing with the present evil called terrorism. Where should we start working from to give the kind of gain or to achieve the kind of result that is expected of us to literally reduce the incident of terrorism in our country? This is just a generic, broad question, General.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much for that question. The starting point, of course, is from a hybrid perspective. Hybrid in the sense that not only do we encourage the troops, who are engaged in the kinetic aspect of the operation, but to also, look at other aspects which, in general terms are referred to as non-kinetic, which, of course, essentially hovers around good governance. And then also taking steps to ensure that the populace, understand the nuances associated with the challenges that we currently face. And that's why, for me as a person, anytime we hear individuals who make very inciting comments, I think that such people should be picked up immediately. And that's why I'm glad that even though the statement made by Senator Fadaunsi is a political one, but I think that it also borders on incitement to violence. And I think the police has done the right thing by inviting him, and it should be questioned even beyond that. Added to that, of course, is the Sheikh in Kano, Sheikh Jingil, who also made some comments, which, of course, I believe is also inciting, inciting, that could also add to the bouquet of threats that we have. He also should be arrested. And I also believe that the various comments that someone like Gumi has been making also demands, that he be, called, not just to order, but of course, invited and arrested, and for them to, in order to, show, to let the, populace know that there's nobody who is above the law. And then when you say things that are not right, you should be called in to answer. And I think if we do that, then of course it will give some form of advantage, or if you like, some form of motivation to the defense and security agencies, especially, the police, the DSS, and of course the military. And then, of course, those criminals in their various hideouts will also know that it's no longer business as usual. Because you must understand that the criminals who may be behind the veil are also looking at those of us that are in the open. What do we say? How does it align with, the ideology, or if you like, their thinking? And so when they hear such comments from these individuals that I've just mentioned, it motivates them. It gives them the impression that, look, so we are on the right course. We are not acting, against the wishes of the people. So they think that they are getting support in that sense. So for me, in a direct answer to your question, is that we should have a hybrid approach. While sustaining, the kinetic operations, we must also, ensure that these other aspects are taken care of, wherein, those who offend the law are called question. And of course, for us to also ensure that issues that have to do with good governance, making provisions for unemployment to reduce, and also taking steps to ensure that the economic hardship that is currently, we are facing in the country is also reduced. So if you like, the combination of all these, what I believe will be able to give us some respite. And so once that is sustained, then over a period, you realize that we will no longer be hearing of killings and violence on a daily basis, that life begins to get better and better as we go by.
Well, General, fantastic presentation, again, referring to your presentation at on the states of the nation, and as well as issues around the national emergency declared on insecurity. I think it's been over a year, or almost a year, since that was declared, somewhere around November 2025. There are those who would question, beyond the president's words of declaring a state of emergency on national security or insecurity, what has changed or what has happened, which you captured in your presentation. For someone who was commander of Operation Lafia Dole, which is now Operation Heading Kai, what makes the security of Nigeria really, really complex and complicated? Because Nigerians are always asking, why is it easier? I mean, there was a time where, for instance, some Americans were, I think, kidnapped, and it took about maybe 7 or 9 American soldiers to come into the country, got the job done, and they left. But in this country, People are held in captivity, 56 days in Orire, for instance. In Borno, Goza, we hear that they've been there now, headed for maybe 90 days. In fact, Alain Dume has been crying for quite some time, mentioning about 5 areas in Borno State where people have been kidnapped and they're still in captivity. In fact, we understand that there are places, maybe you can also confirm that for us, General, in Nigeria, where the people fear the bandits more than they fear the Nigerian army or the police. So what makes our own security architecture here is so complex and complicated that it's so much for people to comprehend?
All right, let me thank you for
General Kelly.
And even though I've made representations in the past,
General Kelly,
answer to this, I think it bears repetition here. No doubt, we have capacity challenges. There's no doubt about it. But I usually say that Rome was not built in a day. And let me also reiterate what I started with, which is that coming to this station to speak to issues is from the position of knowledge and understanding as to how things work, how things are, and how things work. Now, you see, when there is nobody, especially speaking for the defense and security, that is the military, the police, and of course other intelligence services, there is no officer of any of these establishments that will go to sleep when there are issues. Now, for the military itself, we have had series of training, series of meetings, series of conferences, and seminars in order to look at some of these issues. Now, there is a gap, and that gap is not, it might not be right for me to come to television and to begin to read them out. All I can say is that, quite a lot still needs to be done, and I think that the representation which I made that day is also, which you referenced, is also what I believe that, is the issue. Many of the challenges, of course, are already been, I would say they are known to government and they are already working at it. And I think this must have informed the President Commander-in-Chief recently making the intervention regarding the army, which of course I believe is also the first step in the very long journey on reprofessionalizing the armed forces. So ditto for the police, ditto for the DSS and other agencies. And don't also forget that the financial implication for some of these interventions is not something that is small. And if I may reference, what you said regarding the issue with the American citizen who was kidnapped, and then of course there were some forces that came in to rescue them. You should also ask yourself currently what the issues are with the US and Iran. And let me also perhaps mention that if you bring side by side the budget that the US spends for their military, for their defense and security, relative to ours, certainly, you can't compare them. So that does not imply that we must do as the US. It is always necessary for you to be able to assess what you can, what is possible, and then for you to build that capacity over time. And I think that that's exactly what is being done. I believe that the state of emergency ought to have been, have taken greater effect in the sense that we need to understand what is involved and what needs to be stepped down in terms of governance, or if you like, in terms of budgeting for other areas of governance, and that must be shifted to the security angle so that we can have greater speed of accomplishment of tasks that we have. But that we have not seen. The reason for it, like I said, I'm not in government. I said it before. I'm not in government, so I may not know the details of it. But all I can tell you that there is no responsible government or responsible military leadership, or if you like, defense and security leadership, that knows that enough is not being done within the matrix of the what holds within the economy, that he himself will not speak out. So that that the space may appear to be very slow does not imply that action is not being done. We are hoping that as the economy improves, and then of course our capacity building improves, that we'll be able to address issues within the reasonable time frame that results are expected. So for me, this is what I can say in that regard. But I want to stress that even though there's a lot of upbeat regarding the expansion of the army, for example, that it is not something that is like we have gone to the shelf to pick up what to require. No, it is going to take a very long time before we see the impact of what that change in force posture, what it is.
Well, General, I mean, Nigerians would celebrate it. 8 divisions, so I think 12. That's the increase that we have seen. So it's good that you've put some sort of perspective so that Nigerians will have to reduce their expectations as regards the timeline of when they'll begin to see results. And I'm glad that you spoke a bit about the issues in Osun State, because we are gradually or dramatically seeing an increase in the militarization of our elections. And I wonder perhaps if you think this idea of always having the military contributing to the elections, I wonder if you think it's a dangerous path, because some think that it's also contributing to the military being overstretched. We hear there's a heavy presence of the military in Osun State as we speak.
Yes, of course. It's something that is concerning to me and to all many Nigerians. This is not, of course, what we hope to see. This is not what is good enough. And of course, when languages like what Senator Fadansi, used, when we begin to hear them, of course, they are reminiscent of the First Republic, which does not augur well for us. I thought that, now that we're in the Fourth Republic, that we would have learned from our history. And so we don't want a repeat of that. And I think that, for me, it is because of such languages that, of course, the military wouldn't want to see a deterioration of the security situation to such a level that we will never be able to contain. So their presence, which of course, is what we call Operation Safe Conduct, is just a more of a deterrence deployment, not necessarily because they must be involved in electionary duties. This is perhaps for me, even whilst our CDS we have looked at, and to say, look, can't we begin to see how we can reduce our presence? But you see, it's one thing to wish, it's another thing to evaluate the realities and see what is possible. I want to, counsel our politicians to be measured in their, campaign rhetorics. I think that what matters is that we have a peaceful, populace, or if you like, a peaceful, environment, so that when eventually we win our elections, we're able to govern, and then, of course, the whole essence of the value that you are bringing to governance will be very visible. But where you begin to cause chaos, then of course, when the chaos happens, and then maybe by whatever means you win election, then you now begin to use resources that ought to have been, used to advance development, to now begin to correct some of the destructions that have been made. And then of course, the one that remains very, permanent is the psyche of the populace, of the electorate themselves. The younger generation will now think that the only way for you to get to position of authority is by violence. Look at the kind of nonsense that, especially a few days ago, the rhetoric coming from one state governor, with his convoy, and I don't know whether those who were, making those kind of disparaging, if you like, uncomplimentary remarks, especially with respect to this Oshun, whether they are part and parcel of his team or whether they were hired or they are just miscreants. I mean, such things should not be seen in our. You are leaving your own territory, your own state. You go to another state, and then you are encouraging, tout to be using such language. That is not right. And so these are the issues that perhaps the current military leadership, even the commander-in-chief may have seen as, so look, please let us ensure that we do not see a breakdown of law and order. So I believe that the deployment of the military in Osun currently is more of a deterrence value to send a signal to miscreants that should they have if they are nothing the idea to cause mayhem, that they will not go scot-free. For me, as a person, and who, of course, having witnessed, and also read of some of the things that have happened with our history, I think that this is not actually the way to go. And more so that we are going to a major election in 2027. This rhetoric certainly we need to change course.
All right, General. There are two issues we must touch before this conversation, and that will be state police. But before we come to state police, let's talk about military earmarks and spendings. I did do like a summation of an analytics from 2016 to 2026 budget, from about in excess of slightly over 1 trillion to the recent one of 5.4 trillion in the 2026 budget. What has come or been earmarked for the military is about, let's just call it approximately to 29-30 trillion. Defense and security is always the highest in our budgets. Now, when Nigerians hear about these monies, they always say, we're spending so much money. Why are we not getting the kind of results? But I know that you talked about earmarks versus actual releases and funding. I would like you to talk to Nigerians about it and tell us exactly, when we hear 5.4 trillion, do we really get at least, say, even 50% of that money, especially for the capital component, coming to the military? Because when we hear these monies, our expectations go up. So when we don't see the kind of results we want to see, we say, then why are we spending this money? So maybe you help us clarify, because you've operated at the highest level of the military.
First of all, let me also thank you for this. It's essential. But I also think that the answer is straightforward. Why? I think the minister, both the Minister of Finance as well as the Minister of Budget and National Planning, they have occasionally come to talk about, what the budget, figures are. That is what is budgeted, what is expected, the income that is expected, because budgets are actually estimates, meaning that within a fiscal year, this is what you hope that will accrue to the federation account, and then of course if such a figure comes, this will be what will be spent. But of course, expectations are one thing, realities are another. So this for me is an answer to it. So to that extent, the budgeted figure is not the actual release. But then it's not for me now to come to the air and begin to tell you the actual figures. That's one. The second thing to know, because when you say that the military, or if you like, the defense budget is usually the highest, security and defense has never been cheap anywhere around the world. Let me, detail a little bit. Recently, I think about a month ago or thereabout, the U.S., all right, the Secretary of Defense approached the Congress asking for about $87 billion to shore up the budget that had already been passed, for them to be able to, execute the task that they have at hand. I'm talking about 87, I think 87 to 89 billion. I can't get the exact figure now. $billion. Just take note of that. Now, come back to us. You're talking about 5 trillion naira. So how much is that in dollars? The reason why I said you need to denominate it in dollars is because the defense equipment that we have or that we use, they are not denominated, the cost, all right, the purchase, the procurement are not denominated in naira. So whereas the volume in naira might appear, high, when you actually disaggregate it, you realize that it's not as much as what you think. But in any case, that does not imply that it's not huge. No, that's not what I'm saying. Now, the reason why I'm also saying this is because sometimes, especially for those of us in the media and a few analysts, when they come to say, look, so much money is being spent, you must put it in context. If you fail to put it in the context, then you will be inciting the public against the established agencies, or if you like, who the populace will not think that they've been given such resources and yet they are doing nothing. So this is the reason why some of us come to comment on things like that. Otherwise, the government will hold those that they have given resources to account. And then, part of why also some of us also come to comment and clarify is also to change the orientation of some people, especially a few elites who may not be seized with the nuances of defense and security, administration. So it is in that context that one tries to say, look, no, I think whereas your thinking might be legitimate, but then it's not logical enough. It's not logical because you fail to take certain factors into consideration. So in reality, is to encourage that look, we must continue to trust the leadership, continue to trust the agencies that will have given certain assignments, and to also, believe that they are doing everything possible, and that if there is anything untoward, of course, they will be called to account, because there are checks and balances, that the government has instituted to be able to ensure that no resources are lost, and that whatever is intended are achieved. So it is not for you and I, who are not within the circle of action, to now begin to impugn, or if you like, impute that certain expectations are not being met. No. So I thought that it's essential for us to focus more on the fact that these men and women who are in the front lines, they are doing the very best, and that they will continue to give in their best under very difficult circumstances.
Yeah, General, before we go to this issue of staple, I wanted to add, so just you can answer us as quickly as possible with respect, sir. The issue of whether we're really doing enough spending in releases to be able to, they call it cashback planning. So whether we're doing enough in terms of our budgeting and in terms of the releases to be able to get the kind of results we want. And I would also like you to tell us how, from your experience, how we can handle the issue of terrorism financing. Because sometimes we look at the combat element and may not give as much airtime to the issue of financing itself, which is almost more significant, because if they don't have the tools and the resources, they will not be able to engage.
All right, so you have more or less come to why I have always advocated that we should have state of emergency and even the declaration of war, because the declaration of war has its instruments, and then the instruments, of course, will be authorized by the National Assembly so that it becomes a law. So this is why what I meant during the presentation that you referenced, that we should know what to suspend and what to push to the future, all in the interest of the current, which is security. So because budget can never be sufficient for everything for you to be able to achieve what you want, some aspects need to be suspended. That is because you are not having enough, in terms of input, financial, or if you like, resource input into addressing the current challenge. So it is from that context that I want to, say that no, enough is certainly not being given. But then you must also rationalize it with other elements, if you like, other aspects of governance, of the economy. So this is why, if you do a cost-benefit analysis of what we must do, then of course you come to a conclusion that, look, let us suspend A, B, C, D in order to optimize the outcomes within the security sector itself. That is on that. On the terrorism financing, of course, is key, and a lot is being done. It is not for me now to come to the air to begin to give out or give suggestions as to what needs to be done. That suggestion is already being passed to the relevant agencies, because you should also know that whatever information one gives here, you are also giving it to the adversary. So it means you'll be telling them, look, we already know your TTP, okay? Change course. So but it just, all I can say here is to re-emphasize the fact that, yes, taking out the source of financing is like taking out the oxygen that fuels terrorism. And I believe that this is part of what the defense and intelligence agencies especially, what they are working on.
Well, General, we need to touch base with state police, because in that presentation, you say state police is absolutely imperative. You say it's the way to go, because you said the police, reminding Nigerians that the police is responsible for internal security. I just want to read perhaps what you said at that meeting. You said, what we must not do is repeat the error of creating a structure that looks like reform and functions like the same old problem in a different uniform. And that's perhaps is the concern of many Nigerians, just how state police is going to work. There are those who query that if the government at the center that is promising to make state police work or not allow the governors abuse it, though some query that they are not able to implement the Supreme Court judgments of local government autonomy except in Osun State. How then does the federal government or the government at the center intends to make state police work at the subnationals without the governors abusing it?
So thank you very much, Nii. No doubt,
well, General,
for me,
General, you've referred to me as Nii. The name is Kelly.
Oh my God! I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Just bear with me.
It's fine, General.
Maybe I'm giving you a new name. Okay, so I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's fine. It's fine, General.
Yeah. So state police is imperative. Imperative for so many reasons. One, I mean, I've said it before. State police is not about bringing policing to the grassroots. No, state police has to do with the level of authority, where instructions are given and where responses are received. So it is in that respect that we must make that distinction, that state police is all about authority. Now, my arguments have been canvassed whether the governors are going to misuse it. You don't say because there's going to be a challenge or because there are problems on the road, then you are not going to embark on your journey. It is when you, in some cases, when you get to the bridge, you'll be able to know how you are going to cross it. Because if you've not tested the waters, then of course you will not be able to know what needs to be employed to be able to, remove the obstacles, on the waterway, as it were. So it is in that regard. Now, what I meant in that, with what you quoted, is the fact that the federal policing structure as it is currently, there are issues. Yes, of course, we may have been blaming the colonial past and so on and so forth. The reality is that we have not been able to train our police, the federal police, very well. We've not been able to administer them very well. And that's why if you see the policeman on the road, in fact, even his appearance irritates the average Nigerian, which is not right. The kitting is poor. And then their training, the way they approach you is also, something that one needs to. And I think that that's what has been, what I meant, that there has to be a reform. So even while we're happy that state police will come on stream, I maintain that the federal policing structure must also be reformed. Reformed by way of training, reformed by way of equipment and logistics and administration. The police need to be the policeman need to be properly paid, remunerated. It needs to be properly quartered. The disposition of a policeman must exude confidence to those that see him. He must give you that assurance that, look, this is someone who actually will be ready to be able to dispense law enforcement in the area where he is. So it is this structure that I'm saying that must be transposed to the state police, so that at the end of the day, the standards of training, the protocols for, or if you like, code of conduct for the policeman at the state level must equally carry this kind of disposition. If he fails to do that, then of course we will be back to square one. And I believe that would be very ominous for us as a people. So now that we are, the frameworks are being orchestrated, this is the time for us to be able to establish, what we must achieve, the standards that must be achieved, the training standards, the training standards, and of course the code of conduct must be properly stipulated, the training institutions, then of course the logistics for it. Again, you may say that some people have argued that all states are not equal economically. Yes, that is true. It does not imply that we are going to have, the state police, being activated in the 36 states of the federation at the same time. No, the geography of threat, the geography of incidences, they are not the same across the country. So because there are differences from one state to the other, we should be able to see how we can segment our state police implementation, ensuring that what should be of focus is the standard and the quality of the policing itself, so that where there are areas of intervention, then of course the federal government can come to shore up whatever lapses that exist in that sense. So for me, it's the right way to go. And then I believe that all hands must be on deck to ensure that the foundations are being laid now, that will ensure that it's on the solid foundation, so that we wouldn't have to be coming back later on in future to be telling this kind of stories that will now speak about the current policing structure.
Well, brilliant submission, General. Just before we let you go, just, I think, a few months ago, the military authorities were decrying record numbers, or very low numbers, in terms of Nigerians or young Nigerians who are interested in joining the army. In fact, we hear what was reported, especially in the south, the southern region where you come from. We hear that young applicants, young Nigerians, are not interested in joining the military that I'm sure you are so proud of when you joined as a young man so many years ago, serving for almost 40 years, of over 40 years. Why are the young Nigerians in the southern part of this country not interested in joining the army, General?
Well, I first and foremost, I usually tell people, many, especially the younger ones, when they say they want to join, I ask them first and foremost, do you want to join because you need job, or you want to join because you want to serve? There are two things. The military requires those who are not just looking for a job, but those who are looking for service. But you see, you can't also be given service and your condition of living is so poor. So this, I believe, is the reason why many of them have refused, because they also make a comparison with other people, or if you like, their peers, as to their economic well-being. And so when you juxtapose it with what the soldier, the average soldier, and that earns, then of course that's a challenge. And that's why I must commend the President Commander-in-Chief for the recent increase in the salaries of soldiers, which I also believe that those of us in retirement, it will also it will touch us. That's by the way. But more importantly is the fact that the average soldier, or if you like, not just the average soldier, the soldier is a man that is sold to the state. Even what he earns is not something that must be debated. Why? Because it's someone that has sold the whole of his being to the state. He can't do anything extra for as long as he remains active in service. So he cannot go to farm. He may do gardening around his house. But even while he's doing that, he could be called up any time. And then, of course, he abandons it. The same for his family. In fact, most soldiers, it is now that I'm beginning to build my family. For close to 37 years that I served, my family more or less suffered. And these are things the public do not know. So the sacrifices in that respect demands that the soldier, the totality of the soldier, the welfare of the soldier must be borne by the state. I hear people saying, are they the only one making sacrifice? No, they get it wrong. The services by the average person in the civil service, he goes to work by 8 and returns 4, 5. He's back home. The soldier is 24/7. The civil servant, he goes on Saturdays, Sundays, he doesn't go to work. Even after 5, once he gets home, nobody calls him. He can even say, look, I've closed. A soldier, there is nothing like that. And then there are other things, sacrifices that you make. So such kind of person, and don't forget that today, by virtue of social media tools, that the younger ones already know some of these things, what exists, what happens. So when they see it, they just realize that, this thing, if this how it's going to be, something is wrong. And then they also see the lives of those who have served, who are now in retirement, and then they begin to ask themselves questions. So these are things that we need to put properly, in context, and then to be able to, so that when we see certain things happening, we should be able to, draw conclusions in one way or the other. But I'm glad that some of those imbalances are already now being addressed. The increase in the salaries of soldiers, which is a good thing. And I think that there are other areas which I believe the government is also looking at to ensure that the totality of welfare and administration of the soldier is top notch, so that our expectations of them will also be met. When I joined, and then even those who joined before me, the knowledge or the awareness, it was not like this. And so, but to God be the glory that we served and we came out alive. All the wars that won fought in Liberia and Sierra Leone,
all right,
and then of course back home here and outside. So it's been quite a wonderful experience, and I'm hoping that we'll sustain the tradition.
General Moss, thank you so much for your service and for coming through for us this morning, bringing your perspective on the issues that border national security and national development. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you.